Yugioh and Malice are some of the top Yu-Gi-Oh strategies in the game, but get way too expensive when you consider the sub-engines that they use in Bestial and Fiendsmith. To be honest, these strategies were already expensive themselves, but the extra cards? A competitive Yu-Gi-Oh strategy can easily cost as much as your rent, and we ain't trying to stay on the street. Fortunately enough, big dog, I've done extensive research for you, and I'm going to be talking about some really powerful budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks that can compete against the meta. I know, MVP! And if that information got you feeling like Terrell Owens when he was talking about that's his quarterback, then hi, I'm TheCaliEffect. Make sure to go ahead and subscribe and comment down below what is your favorite budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck right now. Let's go ahead and jump on in. That's my quarterback! That's my quarterback! What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that's your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. So finding a good competitive budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck could be really hard to do right now, especially considering that right now it is considered a tier 0 Yu-Gi-Oh format, and just about all of the powerful cards to help combat those particular strategies are really expensive. With the Mole Charmy cards being at least $50 a piece, the Bestial and Fiendsmith engine going to astronomical numbers, and saying that it's not tax season, so our wallets are starting off at the size that old school models used to be, which is 0, it can be incredibly hard to find a good Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But fortunately enough, I did a ton of research and I came up with some strategies that you can be playing that are good against the meta or have already been really successful. And of course, big dogs, I understand we're on a budget, so I will post deck list on this video when I can. But for the people that want to see personal deck list of mine, I'll also be posting those on my Patreon as a special thank you for helping me pay my editors, because I'm broke too. It's like $2 a month for a bunch of exclusive and sneak preview content, so really consider it if you can't afford it. Every single one of these budget decks addresses a particular situation where they can thrive in this Yu-Gi-Oh meta. So if you think that there's another deck that can also thrive under certain situations that I'm going to be talking about, go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section. One of the biggest things that I've noticed about Yu-Gi-Oh right now is that hand traps are secretly incredibly expensive. Don't be fooled by Ash Blossom, Infinite Impermanence, and Nibiru all being reprinted inside of the new Blue Eye structure deck. Unfortunately, while those cards are powerful, some of the top cards in the game that players are using are ridiculously expensive. Fortunately enough, not only is a board breaker approach sufficient, it's actually better against strategies like Mitsurugi Raizio, which can play through a ton of interruptions, or even Fiendsmith Raizio, which can just set up a board no matter what. And that's also why I believe that Tenpai Dragon is one of the best budget Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, despite it being hit on the last ban list. Losing both Sengen Kaiman and Tenpai Dragon Chundra on the last forbidden list was huge. But the fortunate thing is that those cards weren't banned, and you only need to resolve one of every single one of those cards to be able to win the game. When the ban list came out, I experimented with a more Kashtira Dragon Ruler heavy approach to be able to mitigate that, and other players played with Fiendsmith and Bestial cards, which kind of out of the question right now, but what has been successful is Sky Striker Tenpai, which kind of cool. Tenpai Dragon doesn't need a ton of monsters to be able to operate. In fact, it plays a ridiculous amount of spell cards. It allows you to be able to get your spell cards like Sky Striker Mobilize, Engage, Afterburners, and Whittle Anchor's second effects, which can be really beneficial for helping you break a board. And the cool thing about this situation is that your Sky Striker cards and your Tenpais have a little bit of synergy. Players would least expect for you to use Tenpai Dragon Hiroku's effect tributing itself off the field, and then chaining a card like Whittle Anchor to be able to take their monster, because at that current time you don't have any on your side of the field. A good example is Derek's Mead Tenpai Dragon Sky Striker deck, which I think is pretty cool. The best part about it is that the most expensive card for this deck is Triple Tactics Thrust, meaning investing in this deck gives you staple cards that can transfer over to other powerful Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. And I want you to keep in mind this particular deck did get a YCS top without the Mole Charmies, no Bestials, and no Fiendsmith. It's not that Tenpai Dragon can't be strong with those particular strategies, it's more so that if you're on a budget, the deck can still be successful without them. It's also really good to know that dragon monsters are well taken care of. Between Tenpai Dragon, Bestials, and Blue Eyes, you're gonna get 3 options, and 2 of them are incredibly strong, budget, and fit those parameters that I just mentioned. The best thing about this strategy is that just 3 copies of Structure Deck Blue Eyes White Destiny is really competitive out of the gate. I know I said Effect Veiler, Infinite Impermanence, Nibiru, and Ash Blossom aren't the high-end hand traps that they used to be, but for about $30, getting playsets of every single one of those cards and a deck that has one card starters is pretty freaking good. And the best thing about Blue Eyes is that it can naturally counter Yugioh. Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon allows you to be able to negate graveyard effects, which actually does come up when you're trying to stop cards like Mirror Lock Aggregator. It also can stop cards like Fiendsmith Engraver or Mitsurugi Saji, all for existing on the side of the field. From there, you can morph your Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon to a myriad of options. Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon allows you to be able to negate card effects on the field, really important for stopping some of those important spells like the Ritual Spell or Fiendsmith Tract, to even being able to summon out Crimson Dragon, which eventually gives you a Cosmic Blazar Dragon, and that card is really good because it can stop summons, something that Yugioh will have a hard time dealing with. I haven't even gotten to the part where Blue Eyes Jet Dragon is a complete menace. I learned this the hard way, but Jet Dragon activates in the damage step when it battles a monster to return a card on the field. Yugioh Detonator can't stop that, and the Twitch claims under it, well, they're going to need some other Xseed monsters to be able to trigger its effect. I was really surprised to find out that Blue Eyes has this many tools to be able to combat the best decks in the game, and all of this is straight out of the structure deck. Sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh, you're playing very close to the hip on a budget and are matchup specific, and this happens to be one of the cheapest Yu-Gi-Oh decks that has a direct counter to one of the best decks in the game. There's another deck that has a pretty good matchup, just like how Blue Eyes does against Yugioh, and just so happens to be a structure deck. Unfortunately, it's not Red Dragon Archfiend, but the Master of Disaster, the King of Faster. Will have its time soon, but Fire King is really good. For the past couple of months, I've been playing a really toe to the ground, pure Fire King Yu-Gi-Oh deck, not only in Master Duel, of course for the TCG, and I've had some really good results. You see, Malice absolutely hates when it has its monsters interrupted, and the interruption is at best when it's in destruction, and Fire King, of course, has that down. What I like the most about 3 structure deck Fire Kings and a couple of cheap cards from Rage of the Abyss is that this strategy just keeps going, with tons of ways to just flat out destroy the Malice monsters, preventing them from being used for a link summon. I've been using Fire King, Skyburn, and Final Bringer of the End Times in combination with another to be able to dismantle boards and dodge some of their targeting effects. Also, since Fire King is a fire deck, the Bestial monsters don't work against you. They strictly have to use their Bestial monsters to be able to get rid of their Malice. And when they do that, it leaves them more prone to destruction. Now, I know Malice does have that silver bullet in Dimension Shifter, which feels bad. But absolutely, none of the Charmy cards work well against an experienced Fire King player. It's really easy to play around a lot of the hand interruptions or interruptions that they'll be able to put up, despite what they do, as long as it's not a shifter. And even under a shifter, it's ironically not the end of the world. And for the people that are interested about how powerful this budget deck is, last month I built a Fire King deck to be able to go against Fiendsmith, which it has a pretty decent matchup against. And I also put up a deck profile that you guys can go ahead and check out. I've since updated it, but it's a really solid base. And that particular profile, I was using Kashtira Finwer. It is incredible in this Yu-Gi-Oh meta. Banishing cards face down means that your opponent never gets it again, but I think you guys could actually take it a bit further. The extra deck in Yu-Gi-Oh is incredibly fragile right now, so you could incorporate a bigger Kashtira engine inside of your Fire King deck, or you could just flat out play Kashtira. The Kashtira monsters provide some really solid plays, with Unicorn being able to banish monsters like Yugioh Detonator from the extra deck face down, which can take away a pivotal play, or being able to get rid of those Malice or Fiendsmith monsters that the opponent is so reliant on. You can genuinely put your opponent in a really bad bind and easily shut off one part of their engine. I think just like how we've seen expensive Tenpai Dragon Bestial Fiendsmith and cheap Tenpai Dragon Striker, you can easily concoct a Kashtira Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that puts a ton of pressure on your opponent and can establish some really solid boards. Whether it's pure Fire King or some other variant, I think that there's some legit potential with this deck, and if the other cards get cheaper, looking at you quarter century Stampede, do your thing. It's already an established Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that has been successful for a few years. And lastly, for my top 5, a Copium take. Everybody has that Yu-Gi-Oh strategy, that underdog that you root for. and mine is a little bit different than what it usually is. I love to put these Copium takes at the end of the video because they're somewhat serious. They have a little bit of information backed up to them, but more often than not, it's just the kid in me wanting the underdog to succeed. So, of course, if you got that Copium take, let me know. I actually have Branded as my Copium take. Now, hear me out. Like I said, with the Tenpai Dragon strategy, we are in a format where you can use board breakers. And Tenpai Dragon can not only use the same triple tactics thrust to be able to get into board breakers, but triple tactics thrust can also be used to be able to search engine cards like Branded Fusion, or if Branded Fusion gets stopped, Fusion Duplication, which Fusion summons on the opponent's turn. We saw on the live stream that a particular Branded player was summoning Ido the Supreme Being, which I think is a jerk card. I'm never really a fan of those type of locks, but it could be successful if push come to shove against the top decks in the game. What I'm more excited about with Branded is that it does have all of the necessary tools to be a successful deck in this meta. It has the ability to keep playing past turns 1 and 2, an infinite engine that can grind. It is an incredible board breaker style Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and it also has a win condition, which may not be fair, but we're gonna leave that to the other people that complain when we do it to them. Branded even topped a regional last weekend, and unfortunately we don't have the information on what exactly was in the deck list, but since Branded has already been pretty much solved as a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, we can pretty much guess and almost figure out the cards that were played, and almost assuredly every single Yu-Gi-Oh card is pretty budget. Now again, that's just a Copium take. Branded topping could be a fluke. It may never see a top again, but there's also that silver lining that it does see more tops, and it is one of those really powerful budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks. It also just so happens to be a structure deck as well. And that's all that I got for the top 5 budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks this format. Let me know, what do you think about these strategies? Of course, Big Dog, I'm always excited to see what you have to say in the comment section. And if you guys want to see a Branded deck profile as well as some other deck profiles, I possibly will be putting them on my other channel, Cali Clips, when I stream. I like building decks and sharing with the community what I have. Until then, Big Dog, make sure you check out these other videos so I can catch you on the next one.